Hello, everyone. I'm Sydney Shepard, editor of Occupational Health and Safety magazine. Welcome to this live one-hour webinar titled OSHA Inspections 2021, Tips from a Former OSHA Head. Our sponsor for today's webinar is Avetta, and we have two speakers for today's event. The first is Tom Sifich. Tom is president of TFC and Associates, a safety, health, and environmental management consulting firm. He also serves as a strategic advisor for Avetta. Tom was previously the vice president of EHS Global Business Support at the pharmaceutical company GlaxoSmithKline and held a safety management position at IBM and Allied Chemical Corporation. Tom served as the 102nd president of the American Society of Safety Professionals and is an ASSE fellow. Our second speaker is Edwin Falk Jr. Ed is a partner in the Atlanta office of Fisher & Phillips. Ed also serves as president of Fisher Phillips Safety Solutions. Prior to joining Fisher Phillips, Ed was the Assistant Secretary of Labor for the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. Named by President George W. Bush to head OSHA, Ed served in that capacity from April 2006 to November of 2008. During his tenure at OSHA, workplace injury, illness, and fatality rates dropped to their lowest levels in recorded history. For more than 30 years, Ed has worked in the labor and employment area, focusing on occupational safety and health issues. He served on the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission in Washington, D.C., chairing the commission from March 1990 to February 1994. Before we get started, I do want to address a few housekeeping items. At the end of the presentation, there will be a Q&A session where I will ask Tom and Ed a few questions from you. If you would like to submit a question, you are more than welcome to use the Ask a Question console on your screen at any point during the webinar. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, click on the Help button located below the slide window and you will receive technical assistance. And finally, after this virtual event today, a link to an archived version of the webinar will be emailed to you so that you can view it again or share it with a colleague. I want to give one more special thank you to Avetta for sponsoring this webinar and our speakers for presenting our audience with this very important information. And now I'll turn it over to you, Tom.
Great. Thank you, Sydney. And hello, everyone. I'll be joining you today from Raleigh, North Carolina, and Ed is in Atlanta. Before we get started, I would like just to say a brief word about Avetta. At Avetta, we offer technology and software solutions for global supply chain risk management in 120 countries. We specialize in all aspects of supplier and contractor risk management, from pre-qualification, auditing, monitoring, all the way through to performance and project evaluation. We have 450 clients around the world, and we connect those clients with 85,000 suppliers, with active connections between clients and suppliers of 360,000 that cover over 3 million workers. If you have questions or would like more information about Avetta, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation. Of course, you don't get to see Ed or I directly on this particular platform, so we throw our pictures in so you can at least associate a face with a voice. And I've done a number of programs together, and at every program, we always lead out by thanking everybody in attendance for your commitment to safety. We quote Vince Lombardi: "Winning is not a sometime thing; it is an all-time thing," and that's so true with safety. And so we do thank you for your efforts. Obviously, we're going to be talking about complying with the law today and OSHA inspections, but ultimately it's about keeping people safe and getting people to return home to their jobs after the end of their workday. So today, from an introductory standpoint, why is this topic of significant concern right now? I mean, OSHA inspections are not a new thing, but there's a number of challenging aspects right now. Certainly, there's a new administration, and philosophically, if you've been in this field for a while, Ed is a former OSHA director, has been involved for decades in safety and health. I've been on the other side in the regulated community from the safety and health standpoint. And we all know that when you have a different change in administration, particularly from one party to the other, there's usually a difference in emphasis. And we don't have any reason to believe that won't be the case this time with a new Democratic administration. I pulled up some numbers just to compare the first 3 years of the Trump administration. If you compare that to the last 3 years of the Obama administration, there were approximately 5,000 less federal OSHA inspections a year in the Trump administration versus the Obama administration. So clearly there's going to be a focus on more inspections. And one thing that we all are aware of is we're dealing with the coronavirus issue, and so that's certainly going to create some very interesting outcomes or direction, perhaps is the best way to say that, for the new administration and how they're going to address that. Certainly, there have been inspections, there have been citations related to the pandemic. But certainly there's likely to be a change in focus. OSHA is going to be looking to make up for lost inspections. For fiscal year 20 in this past year, there certainly were far less total inspections, and there's going to be certainly a belief that there's going to be more inspections going forward. Congress and unions are going to be more aggressive in their pressing for more inspections, and we're going to probably go back to seeing more press releases of companies that are cited, kind of the name and shame, focus of trying to embarrass companies to improve their compliance. So certainly there have been more complaints from a coronavirus standpoint, and certainly we think the initial work of this new administration is going to be looking at ramping up the inspections in that area. OSHA inspections are going to be increased. Congress passed a bill in 2015 saying OSHA penalties will be increased along with inspections. But Congress passed a law in 2015 saying that OSHA penalties needed to be indexed to inflation, so they certainly will go up every year. Currently, willful and repeat are 134,000, serious and are at 13,400. Failure to abate, 13,400, and of course are on a failure to abate that much on a daily basis. We're expecting to see some record-keeping changes, perhaps go back to the electronic reporting that the Trump administration put on hold. We're likely to see more emphasis on the severe violators enforcement program. This is where companies that have particularly egregious citations or multiple violations, repeat violations, get highlighted as severe violators, which is not a good thing for business. Companies that are in this program, whether, we perhaps argue whether the right company sometimes gets selected, but once a company's in the severe violator enforcement program, that certainly is a black mark. We expect to see more whistleblowing complaints. A big one we expect to see are more negligence lawsuits. Ed can talk about what his view is on that for wrongful death related to the pandemic. There's been some back and forth in Congress about whether employers will be protected and not have their from their employees suing. With a Democratic Congress, that's probably not going to happen. So again, that's still to be played out. Why be concerned if with inspections, depending on the outcome of the inspection, companies can be prohibited from bidding on projects, both in the public sector and the private sector. This is a big area, certainly Avetta works with companies on to pre-qualified companies. And we expect to see more reporting requirements, as we said. So, with that, I'm going to pass the torch on to Ed now to start with OSHA's violations.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that, and welcome everybody. And I will give you my increased my greetings also, and thank you for your commitment to safety and health. Because one thing I feel like maybe one thing good thing that came out of the pandemic, if there's anything, was the fact that the safety profession, I believe, now is seen in a much better, a much positive light, much more actively used light by companies, by all the C-suite people, and so I think that's been a positive. So for a long time, safety and health really kind of got, I thought, didn't get the credit that they deserve. So, but I'm not going to go through each one of these. We're actually waiting for 2020 most frequently cited citations to come out, or most frequently cited violations, the standards that were cited. You can pretty much say that this is what you're going to see come out next time. I think you'll see. I don't know if there'd be really much change. There may be maybe on the fall protection. It may be that the fall protection for general industry as opposed to construction may be replacing that. But HAZCOM has always been up in the number 1 or number 2 slot there. So I don't expect to see a whole lot of change here come when they finally do publish these things. So, but we don't need to go. I just put those there because when you're thinking about it, when OSHA's going to show up, you need to look and say, well, what do they look at? What are they going? What are the things that do? Well, this kind of gives you an idea about, here's the top 10 that when they go in nationwide, this is what they're citing employers on. Now, you can go on the OSHA website and go under statistics there, and if you there's a thing about inspection or violations based on NAICS code numbers. You can put your industry's NAICS code in there, and it will pop up all the site. It will list all the different standards that have been cited. It will tell you how frequently they were cited over the last, I don't know if it's just a year or more. But anyway, that's a way because, and now you can see, okay, these are the ones in my industry. This is what OSHA inspectors find. And we better make sure that we got all these things covered and we don't have any outstanding issues that could result in us being cited for one of these standards. So that's one of the reasons I put the top 10 up there, because I want you to be thinking about, in advance, before OSHA ever shows up, make sure that all those things that are that potentially you could get cited for, you've addressed, and therefore you don't have to worry about if OSHA shows up. So, but one of the things that we're going to be talking about, this is on the general duty clause. This is a list. I saw this list was done back in 2016. I suspect it has not changed during those intervening 4 or 5 years because it just don't. There's not a lot of citations issued on general duty. Unfortunately, they don't keep those records, and these two researchers got this information, and I had never seen that before. So I include that in the slides here because once again, you got things you need to be looking at. Make sure that you in advance so that the OSHA inspectors can't cite you for those things if they happen to show up. So let's keep going. We got a lot to check on here. I put these the next slide and the next slide. I put those in here because this is something that most employers don't ever even think about during an inspection. This is basically what the burden of proof is for OSHA. This is what OSHA has to prove. What the inspector, when he or she is doing the inspection, if she thinks they have a violation, then they're going to have to do the analysis there. This analysis here: was there a standard? Was the standard applied to the condition? Was there a non-compliance with the standard? Were the employees exposed? And did the employer knew with the exercise of reasonable diligence could have known about the violation? You see, if OSHA can't prove those four things, then guess what? They can't, there's no citation, they can't issue a citation. Well, they can issue a citation, but they're not going to win on it. And of course, then they're going to select the characterization whether it's willful, excuse me, serious, willful, or repeat. And of course, the burden of proof here is the preponderance of the evidence, which is a little bit easier standard than than like something like you would see in a criminal case or something like that. So it does allow OSHA a little bit of leeway to be able to cite employers on these things, but you should be thinking during the inspection, because when I'm involved in a lot of inspections. I've been doing this since 1980. It was the first time I started doing safety work. The reason I got involved in that, in safety, I was people asked me how I started in safety, and I told them it was by accident, but really it was by fatality. I was up in Smyrna, Tennessee. One of my clients was a construction company building a plant there, and while I was there to do supervisory training on labor and employment issues, while I was there, an employee standing halfway up a 6-foot ladder, so he was halfway up, he was 3 feet off the ground, fell backwards and got killed. Now, I'll tell you one thing, I have had 2 of these cases that employees stood halfway up a 6-foot ladder, fell back and got killed. So what does that tell us? It tells us that people die very easily. We need to recognize that, and we need to be, why this once again emphasizes the importance of safety. But anyway, so that's how I got involved in it. But when I do a lot of site inspections. I'm brought on during the inspection itself, which is, I kind of prefer that because I can help shape the discussion and hopefully reduce the possibility of getting any citations by the employer. But when I'm there, and this is what I tell my clients when I'm working with them on these inspections, I said, when OSHA takes a picture, you should be thinking to yourself, does he or she see a violation there? And if he or she does see a violation there, or if now I figure out, well, there could be a violation there, then I'm going to be going through this analysis to figure out, what do I got to be able to show that OSHA can't prove that violation? Well, what do I got to do what do I need to put, what information do I need to get that shows that we have a defense to that citation? So I'm constantly doing it when I'm walking around doing these inspections. I'm constantly thinking of that because you want to try to get those things addressed or have that information right away. But also it helps us to make sure that we get those things abated if there is anything. And with respect to abatement, I take the position, listen, if it's a concern of OSHA, it's a concern of us, okay? And I tell my clients that it's a concern of ours, and we're going to address it immediately. It doesn't mean that the fact that you abate something during inspection cannot be used as evidence against you. The case law is clearly on that. So you want to make sure that we're selecting and we're putting that information in there, and we're abating it as quickly, even if we don't think it's a violation. Ask him what he thinks might be more safer. And if it sounds sensible to you, then go ahead and do it. We're here to try to have the great safety. We're not here just to meet the minimum OSHA level, because to be quite frank, if you just meet the OSHA standards, at best you have a fair safety program. You don't even have a good safety program, because the OSHA standards are just a baseline. So we want to make sure we're at that. But we have this here. This is the standard we want to do, because that's what, while we're walking around, we want to be working on that. This is now on the general. The other flip side is that on a general duty citation, these are the things that OSHA must prove, that the condition activity in the workplace presents a hazard, because there's no standard. If there's a standard, there's a presumption that there's a hazard, okay? So does the employer or industry recognize this as a hazard? You know, it may be a hazard in some industries, but absolutely not a hazard in other industries, which sounds kind of conflicting, but I have had those cases. and has a likely to cause death or serious harm, and there is a feasible means exists to eliminate or materially reduce the hazard. So once again, if I see him or her taking pictures of something, and I'm not sure, and this is the other thing too, because when you're out there doing the inspection and they're taking pictures, you better be sure as heck taking the exact same picture that they've taken. And if they're taking something and you're thinking, I don't know, and I've done this a number of times. I see OSHA take a picture of something, and I'm looking at it and saying, well, I wonder what the violation is. I can't see a violation, so what do? I don't keep my mouth shut. I go up and ask the OSHA inspector, I saw you took a picture of that thing back there, that's something, and I was wondering, do you think there's a possible violation there? I don't see anything, but I just wanted to know. And be surprised, you'll be shocked. They'll tell you half the time, or more than half the time. Most of the time, they'll tell you. So now you know what they're thinking, and you can go ahead and either address it, you can abate it, or you got the document that you can start pulling stuff together, the information and the evidence you need to be able to defeat it. So if they issue a citation. All right. I put these slides in here on the informal complaints and the rapid response. That's because OSHA has really been most of their inspectors have been at home working. They've been doing a lot of virtual inspections. I've handled since the pandemic, I've probably handled about 10 or 12 different fatality investigations. Now, they do come out for those. I'll tell you right now, if you have an amputation, they're probably going to come out there again. If you have a serious accident where one or more people are hospitalized, there's a good chance they're going to come out. But all the other stuff and all the COVID-19 stuff, they've been doing that at home over the phone and over the computer. So, and they do these informal complaints of what they call rapid response. So, but you want to make sure you do it right, because OSHA is required under their regs to do between 10 and 15% follow-up on the informal complaints. And of course, that's been a little bit hard to do that with all these COVID cases coming, the COVID-19 cases. So, but we need to do that. So, I recommend to clients, do not use their rapid response form. It asks for too many admissions. Do your own investigation, and then fill out, write them a letter saying, here's what you alleged in your, usually this is how it goes. I've received your letter dated such and saying and noted about the informal complaint. The complaint stated this. We care about so-and-so X company very serious about the safety of its employees. We've conducted an investigation, and here's our findings. And for item 1, here's what we found. So you want to make sure that, and that's kind of what I would do. Don't use their form. Just do the investigation. Draft a letter up there. Tell them that you investigated it, and here's what we found. And that way you avoid doing admissions. You might want to also note corrective action you've done. You may find that there are some things that you would want to do better and going forward. And also, if you have any supporting documentation to put in there. I do a lot of informal complaint letters for clients, and inevitably I'll have, in addition to the letter, where we discuss what we found and all this stuff and why where there was no violation or anything here. But then I'll see attachment A, see attachment B, and there's going to be probably, sometimes I may have up to 15 or 20 different attachments to the letter, in the back of the letter with the cover sheet on top says attachment A, so they know where it is. You got to really hand feed that stuff. But that way you show that you care, because if you don't show you care, like I said, OSHA has to look at X number, 10 to 15% of the informal complaint responses. They have to do follow-ups on. Well, and I'll give you an example of this real quick. I had a client that called me up and said, Ed, we got $60,000 in penalties on citations and penalties. I said, wow. And I said, I didn't even know you had an inspection. He said, well, we just thought we weren't going to get anything, but we just, so we didn't call you. I said, oh, well, that's okay. And so I said, well, was it a complaint inspection or what? Well, he said, well, it was kind of a complaint. We got this letter from them that said that they had these complaints, and then we sent a letter back responding to it, and then they came out and did an inspection. I said, well, tell me something. What did you put in your letter? Well, they were just flat out wrong. The employees didn't know what they were talking about, and they were basically lying. So that's what we said. The employees don't know what they're talking about, and they're lying. Well, guess who's going to get the inspection? They did. It cost them $60,000. Well, we got it down a lot, but anyway, still. So don't be so, and put all that stuff. And of course, you want to post it. Now, the letter says we request you to post. What I do is I do not post it right up front. I wait till we complete our response letter, and I post it as OSHA's informal complaint letter, and then post our response next to it at the same time. And I note that in the end of the letter. So that's why it's important there. Okay. All right, now let's go. We're going to go now to the OSHA showing up at the door here. And of course, we want to make sure that we're kind of balancing our things. We want to balance. We'll have a balanced approach here. We're going to fulfill our responsibilities under the Act. We're going to do that. We want to do that. At the same time, we're going to make sure that we're asserting our employees' rights. And it's a balancing act here between the two. But as Tom mentioned, you're going to see much more aggressive inspections coming in the Biden administration. It's just going to happen. You know, it's just traditionally it has always been that way. But I'll tell you the truth. There's going to be, you know, a lot more, and it's probably going to keep me really busy for the next 4 years. Because if you look, they put in the Secretary of Labor, former union background. You know, the Deputy Secretary of Labor. She's an activist. She's in the California Department of Labor. Been very active for employee rights. So you're going to have that. You're going to have the acting head of OSHA also has a background with the union. So the unions are going to be much more involved in these things, as Tom mentioned, and we're going to see a much bigger push on bigger penalties, more citations, more inspections, the whole bit. So you're going to have to ensure or make sure that you assert your rights during these inspections. Because I can tell you right now, I have had clients in the past. They thought before I got involved, they thought if they told everything they knew to OSHA inspector, and if they gave every document they had to the OSHA inspector, that somehow that would make things okay. Well, guess what? It didn't work out too well for the ones for my clients, unfortunately. But anyway, so we just got to always remember this. We got a balance here, and we're just going to be asserting our rights and making sure that the inspection is conducted as a matter. I got an email the other day from one of my other attorneys at one of our other offices. Fisher Phillips has 35 offices around the country, so we spread out a lot. We have probably the largest OSHA practice group in the country. We got over 30 lawyers that's pretty much, you know, we have that are doing OSHA most of the time. But I got an email from one of the guys, and he said, well, the OSHA inspector showed up at this, it was a construction site, and started walking around the construction site taking pictures and never told anybody he was there. Well, you know, if you ever had that situation, call me, because we're going to be talking serious, because you're entitled to be able to go around on the walk around, you know, and if they don't do those things, then you're probably going to be able to get any photographs they took, any evidence they found, any violations they saw. Guess what? It's probably going to be thrown out. So once again, that's where you got to make sure you're asserting your rights. Now, you say, well, Ed, I don't want to do that. I want to work with OSHA. But everybody wants to work with OSHA, and I want to work with OSHA. But there is rules of the game, and we're going to follow the rules, and we're going to protect ourselves, and we're going to protect our employees at the same time, and protect the company. So I put this thing in here about supervisory knowledge, and the reason I put this in there is because companies are inanimate objects, so OSHA they can start a company, but they got to be able to prove the violations. Go back to that that 4-step process. Well, guess what? They got to have some way to do it. So a supervisor or manager of the company, their statements are binding on the company. And that's where OSHA is going to be going. They're going to want to interview supervisors and managers. They're going to try to get signed written statements from them. And we'll talk about that and why we're not going to do that. But And that's why they're doing it, because in order for them to show, particularly that the employer knew with the exercise reasonable diligence, should have known about the violation or knew of the hazard or whatever, they got to get through management. Now the hourly employees, they're going to be interviewing those people, and that's going to help. They're going to give that information. They're going to take this. They'll probably take statements from them if you don't tell them, their rights. But we'll talk about that in a minute too. But anyway, so you need to be always aware of that whatever you say as a manager or supervisor is binding on the company, and they're going to use that against the company. So that's why I put this particular slide in here. This one here is employee misconduct defense. I would say that with respect to this OSHA citations that are either withdrawn by OSHA or thrown out by the review commission judges, probably 80% of them is because the employer was able to show the employee misconduct defense. Now, unfortunately, most employers don't even know about the defense. That's part of one of the problems. Secondly, they don't have the things in place to be able to do it. So these are the four elements basically that you need to do. You have established work rules. You have established work that you can't. Okay, the easiest one is lockout, tagout. Guy, OSHA comes in and says that guy didn't. Your employee did not lock out that machine before he did service and maintenance on it. Okay, well, Mr. Inspector, we have a safety. We have a rule. Or we have our lockout tagout procedure or policy, and we have lockout procedures for each piece of equipment, and that shows exactly how you have to lock out. And by the way, next bullet there is we train the employees on our rules and train them on how to read our policies. And matter of fact, we keep our lockout tagout procedure on a copy of it on each machine. It's laminated, it looks so pretty, with pictures in there where they lock out. So we do that. And then we also, our supervisors are required to go around at least 3 times a day and do what they call safety observations, making sure, first of all, that everybody's doing their job, but secondly, and more importantly, is to make sure that they're doing their job safely, that they're not violating our rules. And at the same time, we have our safety personnel at the plant here. We have them go through the plant at least once a day, and they do safety observations to determine if they see any violations. Then they're going to bring that to the attention of the supervisor, and then the supervisor is going to either discipline them or at least give them some type of oral warning or whatever it will be. But we're going to document that, and that's the last one. But so we have steps where we have people going around making sure that everyone's following our safety rules. And the last bullet there, when we find someone violating our rules, we're going to discipline them under our disciplinary policy. So. And make sure anything you see here in red on this PowerPoint means this is very important. Documentation. If you don't document it, it never happened. Okay, so document this. It's critical because a lot of employers, most employers will fall down the third bullet and the fourth bullet. Don't have those things in place. So anyway, of course, we want to make sure that we have everything in place before OSHA shows up. Your OSHA poster, and OSHA, make sure you have that. The more current one there, and one of the things Tom said, well, there's going to be a lot of things going back. We're going to go back to the Obama era time or whatever you want to call it. And there's going to be a lot of things they're going to do. One of the things they're probably going to be doing is much more focused on record keeping, retaliation, and whistleblower. Okay, and so part of the requirement too is you're supposed to have a policy or procedure for reporting. Workplace hazards and stuff, those type of things. Well, if you have the OSHA poster, the most recent one, it already has all that language in there that you have to have. So you might as well use that there. We need to make sure we have a procedure. We're going to how to contact people, let them know that OSHA's there. We're going to have, who's going to handle what during the OSHA inspection there, and that's the assignment of responsibilities. They're going to be looking at our training records more than likely. They're going to look for overall operations and the COVID-19 stuff. They're going to be looking at that. They're going to be looking at did Did we have our social distancing? Did we require masks? Did we do sanitation? Did we do health screening? And these are all very important because if you look at the cases that are going to, I predict you right now, you're going to see a lot more cases being filed in state court, more likely state court than federal court. But they may be pushed to federal court because of jurisdiction, you know. But anyway, there's a bunch of wrongful death actions, particularly out in California, on COVID-19. And what are they alleging? They're alleging that the employee died from COVID-19 because the employer didn't social distance it, didn't require masks or enforce masks, didn't do sanitation, did not do health screening tests, all those things. So you better make sure you're doing all those. And guess what? You better be doing those because OSHA's going to be looking at them too. Because there's Biden signed on the day one, he signed an executive order telling them that to focus on COVID-19. OSHA needs to focus on that, determine if there's going to be an emergency temporary standard by the 15th of this month. So there's clearly, the word has been pushed out there that you're going to be looking at COVID-19 cases while you're at every plant. So you need to be aware of those things because you don't want to get yourself set up. You want to make sure we have cameras and camera, because OSHA's going to be taking pictures, so we're going to take pictures. We want to look at any previous citations. We're going to be looking at any audits. And make sure that, first of all, I'm a big fan of in-house and third-party audits, unless you are not going to follow up on them, because that will kill you. You want to get a willful violation, have us do your own audit or do a third-party audit, get the report, says that there's these hazards here, and do nothing. Do not do anything to correct them. I guarantee you if OSHA shows up. And those are not privileged documents, because they were not made in anticipation of litigation. So OSHA is going to be able to get those documents. They go look and say, oh, look, they said they needed to work on update or do their lockout tagout, the periodic inspections on lockout tagout, so we're doing it. Well, Lord, let's see your periodic inspection. Well, we didn't do them. Well, you knew you're supposed to do them, and you didn't do it. Now it shows you had knowledge, which is the main element on the citation, and then you didn't do it, so you're negligent, and so you got a willful violation, all because you didn't address any of those things. So just make sure, review those previous third-party audits, your audits, whatever you're doing, and make sure you're doing something to correct everything in those things. Do not allow them to sit there, which a lot of employers do. All right. This is just real quick. You know, imminent danger. You know, I probably had the 3 years I was at OSHA, I probably had 3 or 4 of those. So they hardly ever come. Fatalities, catastrophic accidents. If you have those, and you know that under the OSHA record-keeping standard, all employers, even if you're exempt from doing the 300 logs and the 300-day summaries, all employers, if you got one employer, you're covered under record-keeping reporting requirements. So if you have a work-related fatality, you have 8 hours to contact OSHA. You got to call them on the phone, and the record-keeping standard actually has the questions they're going to ask you. If you have a workplace hospitalization of 1 or more employees, and hospitalization means they're actually admitted to the hospital, or an amputation, or a loss of an eye. Now, I've been doing this over 30 years, and I've never had a loss of an eye. But anyway, they put that in there, so don't ask me why, but they did. Anyway, if you have one of those 3 things, you have 24 hours. And remember, they're all work-related. It has to be work-related. You have 24 hours to contact OSHA and let them know about that. And, of course, if you contact OSHA, guess what? They're going to show up more than likely. Very rarely do not show up. So that's kind of the catastrophic accidents, you know, complaints, and then complaints and referrals. This is kind of a self-referral. High hazard industries, I don't know what OSHA is going to do. They're going to have some issues because they got, with all these COVID cases, the numbers are going to be so skewed. You're not going to do, I don't know what they're going to do on that. They're going to have to do something. There are still a lot of special emphasis programs. There's a national emphasis program, and then every region has their own regional or local emphasis programs. You can go on the OSHA website, go on the A to Z index, look on the L for local, look on the local emphasis programs, click on that, and you'll see, you can get, and you can also go to national emphasis programs, and you'll see that there's things for silica, there's things for fall protection, those type of things. So those are the special emphasis programs. So anyway, so let's keep going. We've got a lot to do here. let's see. Let's see. What's it? Oh, when the OSHA inspector shows up, we need to make sure that they're authorized to come there. Where they're authorized, and that you got to be asking them, what is your? Did you come here with a complaint? If you get if you don't know what they're there for, you got to ask them. If OSHA shows up, take them into your room before at the start of the opening conference and say, well, can you tell me why you're here? Now, if you call them, guess what? You know why they're there. You called them. So you all should be, if you're calling OSHA, you should be darn well start preparing for an OSHA inspection. If you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs, you're wasting your time and you're just hurting the company. So we're going to be talking about where the OSHA can go, when they can go, what is the purpose of the inspection, what are the employer's rights. We want to talk about all these things over. Let's keep going. Things to remember. Remember, this is you have rights during inspection. In the Act itself, it says that inspections have to be conducted in a reasonable manner and a reasonable time. So if you have a 9 to 5 operation, it is not reasonable for OSHA to try to do the inspection at midnight, okay? That is not reasonable. You can just tell them to go home and come back the next day. And if they keep constantly want to interview the same person over and over again 2 or 3 times, well, after the second time, that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to say, no, you've already talked to them twice. You're not going to do it again. The inspection under the Act also, the inspection must be completed within 6 months, usually which is the start of the inspection, or when the violation last occurred. We're going to be cooperative. We're going to be responsive, but we're going to maintain control during the inspection. That's what we're talking about here. That's what this thing's really going to be about. This whole program's about is maintaining control. That doesn't mean you're going to piss anybody off. That doesn't mean you're going to be rude. You're going to just be helpful. But you're going to say, well, you gave me this list of 20 type of different documents you wanted. And, this is a complaint inspection on lockout, tagout. What hazard communication or anything else has, bloodborne pathogen has anything to do with, I don't see that they're relevant. Therefore, I'm not going to give you those documents unless you can show to me why these are relevant to the complaint inspection. Now you say, geez, I don't know if I can do that. He might get mad or she might get mad. Well, guess what? They've been told this before, so don't worry about them getting mad. And by the way, it's your rights. You should be asserting this thing. All right, let's keep going. We've got to keep going. Include maintaining control. You should know what your OSHA inspects, what OSHA standards apply. It's surprising how many of my clients have no idea what applies. I'm sitting there going, let's talk about what potential citations you could be looking at just on your operations here. And so we'll go through those there. Let's see, I already talked about this, supporting staff. Will the company require a warrant? I think I have another slide on this, but let me just tell you this. Generally, I do not encourage asking OSHA to get a warrant because if you did, they can go get it and they'll show up on the next day or 2 days later. And of course, they'll probably have another person with them, maybe 2 persons with them, because now they do get a little bit pissed off. So, but there are times when you need to do that. If you have a fatality investigation going on, or so you have a fatality and OSHA's coming in to do inspection, or if you have some type of catastrophic accident, you're probably going to have to ask for a warrant because you're going to have so many darn agencies there working. I'll give you an example of Imperial Sugar down in Savannah. This is when I was when I was heading up OSHA. I think it was 2008. Anyway, the explosion occurred. 16 people died. Well, obviously you got the police there, you got the fire company there, you got the EMT people there. And of course you got the media there, they were right there. OSHA was there because we have an office in Savannah, so that we were there within a half hour before a lot of people. And so they're good. Well, halfway through the day, or towards the end of the day, here comes alcohol, tobacco, and firearms because there was an explosion. They came in, and now they claim this is a crime scene and no one can go in. So then you're dealing with that. And then the next day, the Chemical Safety Board shows up. Oh, on the first day of the accident, state EPA shows up because the fire department was putting out the fire and the water was going into the Savannah River. So you can see why you might have to get a warrant, ask somebody to get a warrant just to give you some breathing space here. So, but anyway, if you're going to require a warrant, you really want to make sure you have a written procedure on that. If you know, I have clients that do that, require warrants. no matter what the government, it doesn't matter what agency it is. If it's a government agency, they need to go get a warrant. So, but you want to have a written procedure for handling the inspections. You need to know exactly. People need to know who's going to handle what and everything. Who's the right person to contact? The OSHA counsel for the company. You know, who's going basically you want to train this. So here's the elements of the.
Hey Ed, this is Tom. Just a quick time check. We got 15 minutes.
All right. Well, we're yeah, I see we are. Okay. Yeah, we're good. All right. All right. Not good. When OSHA shows up, I get this all the time. I get calls from OSHA's here. This is the worst time that for them to show up here because we're in the middle of doing our inventory in the warehouse, and let's tell them to come back later. Well, guess what? You can't tell them to come back later. There is no advanced knowledge. You won't know that they're coming on the first time. After they get there, they'll probably tell you when they're coming back. But the first time, it's actually a criminal offense to give advance notice of an OSHA inspection. So OSHA will not come back. Now, they do have the 1 hour rule. If we need to get another manager there, or a safety director, or something like that, and we can get them there quickly, then you know, OSHA will wait for 1 hour. If the opening conference doesn't start within that hour, then they're going to consider that a refusal of entry and leave and go get a warrant. Now, I've had this happen to me, and I just, you know, and it's just this because we didn't have enough time to get the person we need there. And so what do? I just call the area director. I say, listen, we were just trying to get our guy there. You know, he was delayed getting there. You're more than welcome to come now. If you want to come back now, send him back right now. He's here. Come on back. If you want to come tomorrow, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. Just you don't need to go get a warrant. So, and most of the time they don't. They don't want to go see a federal magistrate to get a warrant. So anyway, when they expect to go. As soon as they get there, they're going to be able to come in right away, unless you're going to tell them to go get a warrant. We want them to explain what is the basis of the inspection. And like I said, if it's a complaint inspection, you've got to get a copy of the complaint because that will outline what they can do. The complaint gives them the authority to come in. Now, if it's an emphasis program or something else, then they can do wall-to-walls usually. Even if it's a complaint, and this is why during the walk-around it's so critical that you make sure you limit that inspection to those areas that the complaint talks about. Because if they see something in plain view or in plain view from where they are, they can go there to investigate that. Okay. So that opens up the inspection they can go. So if they see something in one place, so you know, in that way you should be. If you know OSHA's coming, or if OSHA shows up and you're during an opening conference, you should be having, I don't know, the production manager or the maintenance manager or somebody walking the floor where you know they're going to be going and making sure there are no other violations that they can see. So anyway, and also if there's a union involved, then you need to make sure that the union person, whoever the representative is brought in there too. Now, when you're doing the opening conference, they're going to ask for certain documents. They may ask you the whole list, but one thing they're entitled to right off the bat, they always ask for it, is OSHA 300 logs and 300A summaries. Now, you are required to keep those under the record-keeping standard if you're a company or in an industry that is not exempt. Now, there are partially exempt industries that don't have to do 300 logs or 300As, and there's like 80-some industries. So if you're in that thing, then you're not keeping it. Now, a lot of them keep this because it's a good way to keep up with stuff, and just say, hey, we're not covered. We're exempt. We're partially exempt from that. So, but pretty much every inspection, right after once they finish, during the opening conference, they're going to say, hey, one of the things we want is a 300 log. They may hand you a piece of paper. I see this more and more, where they listed all the different standards and they just check what they want. It's kind of a lazy man's way to do it, but you know, and that's why you need to get your OSHA counsel involved, because you got to say, is this really relevant to this complaint inspection? Because half the stuff is probably not going to be. So once again, we're asserting our rights. So let's keep going. We got to keep going because Tom is going to have a heart attack if we don't get finished sometime. All right. I think we've already talked about this, so let's keep going here. Let's set the ground here. Okay, during the opening conference, you're going to set the ground rules. Well, Ed, what's the ground rules? Well, the ground rules is easy. All right, we're happy we're here to cooperate with OSHA. Obviously, you're going to probably want to do a walk around in the area where your complaint is from. Of course we will. Okay, that's fine. But the ground rules for that is that you must have another member, at least one member of management with you at all times. You cannot walk the plant by yourself. Okay, that's fine. And they know that. And they ain't going to complain about that. Secondly, if you're going to ask for a bunch of documents that I know you want the 300 logs. You asked me that in 308 summaries. But if you want a bunch of other documents, I'd ask you to put it in writing so we know exactly. This way we can determine what documents are relevant to this inspection. We can give you those. And then the other thing is you're probably going to want to interview employees, aren't you? Well, of course I'm going to interview employees. How am I going to find out what happened? Well, that's fine. We would say this with respect to any manager or supervisor, that you will not interview them unless another member of management is present. And of course, if there's a fatality, you darn better well have your OSHA attorney present. I know that sounds self-serving, but on fatalities, you don't have any choice. You really need to have that all set up, and you need to have them all prepped. And we'll talk about them a bit. But so those are the ground rules here. So we'll have that. And we're not going to do interviews out on the floor. If you want to interview anybody, you can come. We're going to come right here to this conference room, and you tell us who you want, and we'll bring them to you. Okay? So we're not going to volunteer information. This is, some people, like I said, they think they just have to talk and talk and talk, and they just get themselves in a hole. You know, the adage is when you're in a hole, stop digging. Right? Okay? Treat with respect to a professional fashion. Notify the company officials. You'd be shocked how you should have that as a policy. If OSHA shows up at any of our facilities, you are responsible to contact X person, Y person, and Z person at the corporate headquarters, because we want to know right away, and we're going to provide assistance and whatever. So, but you'll be shocked how many people don't ever get calls until after they get the citation. And of course, if there's any on-site vendors or contractors, you're going to have them be there. The opening conference, once again, they're going to ask for, these are some of the things they might ask for. The 300, like we talked about, first aid training, they may ask you about that, emergency action plan. Now, one thing you got to know about they check that darn box all the time. Not all employers are required to have an emergency action plan. I think the inspectors don't understand that, but it's not there. So, but first aid, you probably a lot of these things, these are the kind of things you're going to probably see happening there. So. Okay, on the walk around. Once again, we're going to be observing working. May last several hours, or weeks, months. Could work in the months. If it's a complaint inspection, we're going to limit it. If it's a program inspection, they're entitled to go through throughout the entire plant there. They may take photographs and perform tests. If they take any photographs, you take the exact same photograph. No excuses. And you should have two people going around. Someone taking the pictures, someone writing down everything they're doing. We started the walk around at 10 o'clock. At 10:05, they started taking pictures of XYZ machine. We took the same ones. You know, and then we went to this area. Whatever it is, you need to document that clearly. You should have document when the opening conference started, when OSHA got there. All this stuff needs. Then you're going to have documentation of who they interviewed. You would be shocked how many times I say, let me ask you this. I get a client, I'm working on them with the citation. I say, did OSHA interview any employees? I said, yeah, they did. Well, who were they? And they go, you know, I can't remember who all they interviewed. You think I'm teasing, but I'm not. So document that stuff. Make sure that we know who they talk to. So, monitoring. This is very important. If OSHA comes in and they're going to do some type of air monitoring or noise monitoring, we only allow that, and that's one of the ground rules. If you want to do any type of monitoring, we want to do side by side at the same time, so you need to let us know, and we're going to have the right people there. And guess what? If they're going to do air monitoring or noise monitoring, we're not going to have the people qualified normally there to do that. So we're going to do it in another day when we can bring in an industrial hygienist to do that. One of the things they always say, I get the same thing. I've had this clients call me up and say, Ed, OSHA's doing the inspection. Okay. And I knew about that because they've already called me. We've been talking all that. The next thing they call me back, we're on the walk around here, and OSHA wants to do air monitoring. And I told them, I said, well, tell them no, we want to do side by side. And they'll call me back and say, well, the inspector said that what they would do is they'll do their monitoring today and we can do our monitoring tomorrow. And I say, no, that's not how it's going to work here. Because if you don't do side by side, and, you know, OSHA's equipment is not the best, okay? It's kind of old. It's not necessarily calibrated correctly and everything else like that. But if you don't do it at the same time, and if they find a high number, you're overexposed, and you come back the next day and you find that way underexposed, guess what? You still lose. So don't do it. We're going to do side by side. So apples to apples, and we're going to tell them. And if they try to tell you not, we're going to do that, guess what? You call me, and we'll talk about it with the area director or whatever. You say, well, I don't do that. You're going to make them mad. Well, no, we're just asserting our rights, and they're going to understand that. So don't worry about that. So keep working. We got to keep going. We have our right to accompany them. They're allowed to conduct private interviews of non-management employees. Employer representative can be involved with those. They have this thing about third-party representation. This is something that you may see come back in the Biden administration. This is what was brought in the Obama administration, where they said, oh, they had an interpreter. They said, yes, you can have third-party groups there come along and walk around. I'm on a walk around. I'll tell you what, we'll have to dust it off, but we had, during that time period, we had put together our work safety practice group had put together a strategy on what questions to ask to get around that whole thing. So anyway, we're not going to do that. That's for sure. But we can limit the areas that, and we can also require the compliance officers meet all the same requirements that from PPE and everything else that we do. We always talked about accurate notes, photograph what they photograph, have a predetermined route as where you're going to go. You know, and this sounds silly, but I've done this, unfortunately, well, I've done this a lot of times. I shouldn't probably say that, but anyway, you know, when OSHA we have an inspection and we've had an accident or something, and it's in the back part of the plant, and instead of walking all the way through the plant, because, you know, I said, well, I'll ask them, is there an exit door out over at the other end of that plant? And they'll say, yeah, of course, there's always an exit door nearby. We'll say, fine, we're going to go and take a nice walk out in the rain to get to that place. And I'm not teasing. I've been out in the rain, walking around the back of the building and coming in the back door. And so we limit what the OSHA inspector says. And they know about this. They know it's a game. But, you know, so don't worry about it. And they ain't going to get all upset about this. So you're going to have that predetermined route. So we talked about, with respect to employee interviews, with respect to hourly employee interviews, you normally cannot get in there. You can tell the employees, you should tell the employees their rights. You don't have to interview if you don't want to, but if we're cooperative, Lisa says you cooperate, and if OSHA really wants to interview, then they'll take their subpoena and take your deposition. Tell the truth. That's the most important thing. Don't guess. Don't speculate. Now, OSHA at the end of this will probably ask you if you want to sign. If they've been taking notes and a statement, they've written out a statement for you. You do not have to sign anything. You're not required to sign anything. So it's up to you. Now, they're going to probably want to use that against the company, but you know, if you're going to sign it, you better read it very carefully, and you better ask for a copy of it, because guess what? Half the time they don't give them a copy of it. So you want to make sure of that there. So, but we're going to tell them we appreciate their cooperation, but we always got to be careful about OSHA. We never tell them they can't sign because they have whistleblower rights and all this other stuff. So. But anyway, all right, so with respect to managers and supervisors, we'll take a much more stronger approach there. We're always going to have another member of management present taking notes, if nothing else. I mean, I've been involved in a lot of cases, mostly fatality cases, and I'll be there taking notes, but very rarely do I object to it. I'm not there to interfere, but if they get out of hand, then I will step in. But we want to make sure. Tell the truth, don't guess, don't speculate, and with respect to the, now I never tell anybody they can't sign a statement, too. Once again, even the managers and supervisors, but this is what I say to them. You don't have to sign anything, it's up to you, but if I were you, I wouldn't sign. Because all they're trying, they want to use that statement against the company, and they use it, once you sign it, it becomes a legal document, and they're going to use it against the company. So you can sign it if you want to, but if I were you, I wouldn't sign it. And usually that works there. But then you got to tell them this. Oh, when OSHA, if you'd say, I don't want to sign it, they're going to say, well, would you mind just looking through it and initialing it? Well, initialing it is the same as signing. So we're not going to sign it. We're not going to initial it. And guess what? We're not even going to look at it. Because that's what it says. At least they can always say, well, they looked through it and you didn't make any changes, did you? No, well. So I just always tell them, you don't even have to look at it. You can just say, I'm sure you copied everything down. I'm not going to look at it. So we don't allow tape recording. And obviously we just talked about the signed statements there. So. Documentation, these are the things they're going to be looking at. I've already talked about the safety audits. We've got to be really careful about that there. Let's see. I'm going to skip over this. I was going to go this thing here, but as an example why what they couldn't ask for and things like that. But let's just do this. Closing conference. After they finish up their inspection, they're going to call back up and say, they may do a preliminary closing conference after the first day. But normally they just wait until they got everything and all the things are done, and they're getting ready to issue the citations, and they'll call you up and tell you kind of they're going to kind of tell you what possible violations you get, most likely violations you're going to get. They're probably not going to be able to tell you the exact standard. They're not going to tell you about the penalty amounts. They're not going to tell you about what abatements they're going to require, but they will tell you that once you get the citations that you have to be posted for at least 3 days or until the abatement's been completed. So. Whichever is longer. So,
hey Ed, I hate to cut you off before you finish, but we are running out of time here, and I definitely want to make sure that we have time to thank you and Tom for the information that you shared with us today. I'd also like to thank Avetta for sponsoring this webinar, and a special thank you to all of you who listened in and participated with us today. Please remember that in the next day or two, we will be emailing you a link to the archived version of this webinar so that you can view it again or share it with a colleague. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. This ends today's information session.